Good morning. Welcome to today's, good afternoon. I forgot we've got quite a broad spectrum of civil servants today on the call from all across the nation. So welcome to today's discussion on the mental health implications of anti-Black racism for public civil servants. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here in beautiful Victoria, BC, on the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. But it's important to recognize that we're all at this moment privileged to be working and meeting on traditional territories of Canada's First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. It's also very important to recognize that much of this land is unceded. Okay. I think that we should welcome first Minister Ahmed Hussein to the conversation. Minister Hussein has been the Minister of Families, Citizens, Children and Social Development since 2019. He's based in Toronto. Les en français?
Oui, bonjour et bienvenue à la séance d'aujourd'hui. Comme l'a mentionné, je m'appelle Elisabeth, également Lise Martin. Je suis un membre actif du réseau des ambassadeurs contre le racisme. Je suis aussi la coprésidente de l'antenne de la Colombie-Britannique du caucus des employés noirs fédéraux. Je souhaitais apporter une perspective différente en organisant des événements incluant des Noirs situés sur la côte ouest du Canada. En tant que président national du Congrès canado-somalien, le ministre Hussein a collaboré avec des autorités nationales et régionales pour défendre des enjeux importants aux yeux des Canadiens d'origine somalienne, ce qui a renforcé l'engagement civique et l'intégration sociale. Après avoir obtenu un diplôme en droit de l'Université d'Ottawa, le ministre Hussein a pratiqué le droit dans les domaines de la défense criminelle, des droits des immigrants et des réfugiés et des droits de la personne.
Minister Hussein has worked in an organization to enable women in East Africa to access education in colleges and universities in the region, and an organization that empowers journalists in developing countries to cover human rights and governance issues objectively and effectively. Thanks so much for joining us today, Minister.
Bonjour tout le monde, merci de m'avoir donné l'occasion de dire quelques mots aujourd'hui alors que vous participez à cette conversation importante qui célèbre le 25e anniversaire du mois de l'histoire des Noirs. Thank you to the Federal Youth Network and the Federal Black Employee Caucus Pacific Chapter for hosting this important discussion on anti-Black racism impact on mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been 25 years since Black History Month was introduced by the Honorable Jean Augustine, and it is unbelievable to realize that for 25 years we've been able to celebrate Black History Month from coast to coast to coast in Canada because of the leadership of a great champion, a great politician and social activist, educator, Jean Augustine. We know in Canada, diversity is truly our strength. And we know that in order to continue to build a more inclusive and stronger Canada, we need to address systemic discrimination, and we need to dismantle barriers that prevent people from achieving their true potential. And, the pandemic has really highlighted the inequalities that Black Canadians face, including impacts on mental health. Our government gets it. We have been moving very quickly early during the pandemic to support services, to put in place support services to address this mental health challenges among all Canadians, including Black Canadians. Initiatives like the Emergency Community Support Fund to fund organizations that are providing counseling and other supports to people going through difficult times. We know that the fight against systemic discrimination and the fight for inclusion is important was important before the COVID-19 pandemic, but continues to be important even in the midst of this challenging time. And that is why our government has moved forward on a number of really important initiatives to support Black Canadian communities. The Black Entrepreneurship Program, for example, will enable Black businesses to not only survive, but thrive after the pandemic. The National Anti-Racism Strategy, the Anti-Racism Secretariat, the Canadian Institute for People of African Descent, justice reforms, other reforms, including putting in place the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative to increase the capacity of Black Canadian organizations who are delivering critical services for Black Canadian communities. And I was really pleased to see recently the head of our civil service, the clerk of the Privy Council, and in his recent call to action on anti-racism, equity and inclusion, which sets common expectations for leaders across the public service to take practical actions that will be the basis of systemic change. These are just a few examples of the progress that has been made. But we know that there is obviously more work to be done. But Black History Month is also an opportunity for us to reflect, celebrate and acknowledge the amazing, immense contributions that Black Canadians have made and continue to make to Canada. But it is also important for us to continue the journey that was started by those who paved the way, those whose shoulders that we stand on, people like Viola Desmond and Lincoln Alexander and Jean Augustine and Alvin Curling and many others. And their fight for social justice, their fight against systemic discrimination, their fight for a more inclusive, stronger Canada continues. And we owe it to them as well as to ourselves to continue that fight. As employees of the federal government, you can help by being allies, not shying away from difficult conversations, and to keep supporting the visible minority organizations and networks like this one. And so we need to continue to take meaningful action to shape Canada into an even more culturally diverse, compassionate, and prosperous nation. That means addressing issues that have been raised by Black Canadian communities, issues such as mental health, research into and support for culturally sensitive approaches to mental health supports for Black Canadians. And our government has responded to that. Supports for Black youth and the particular challenges that they face with respect to unemployment and other challenges that are pre-COVID, but also some that are related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We will be there for Black Canadian communities, and I really want to pay particular tribute to the Federal Youth Network and the Federal Black Employee Caucus Pacific Chapter for this important leadership of convening this meeting to talk about the important topic of mental health. Mental health carries with it stigma in the general population, in many other ethnocultural communities, but also in the Black Canadian community. And we, in positions of leadership and trust, need to do what we can to remove that stigma and to fight for more supports for Black Canadians facing mental health challenges. So I really want to once again thank you for everything that you're doing every single day. I urge all of you to continue your really important work, and I urge you to recognize that the work that you're doing will make a meaningful contribution to shape a Canada that is even stronger and more prosperous for all of us. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you so much, Minister. Today, we are fortunate to have several esteemed panelists joining us. So we're going to ask that they share their lived experience around the impact of anti-Black racism and their mental health. As well as we have some mental health experts here to help us navigate these waters. I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, including their name, portfolio, and career path, and obstacles they may have faced, including experience with anti-Black racism. So if we can have you each take 2 or 3 minutes to tell us who you are and what your career path has been. Why don't we start with Jenabu?
Sorry, there's always that I'm muted. Hi, hello everyone. My name is Gina Busso, and I am the Director, HR Strategic and Program Development at NSERC, and that's I will keep them at the acronym. It's Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. So I refer them as INSERC and CHERC when I'm talking. So I joined in January, responsible for the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion portfolio. And I'm also responsible for policy development, program development, learning and development. So those are all things that really touch on to that people management side of things. My career, I've worked for other crown corporations and as in the same capacity as a manager organizational development and as an employee relations specialist. So specialize more on dealing with employee relation matters and performance management. And my education background is I have a bachelor's degree in industrial relations and I have a master's in public administration and organizational development. And I have other certifications in workplace investigations and conflict management and conflict coaching. So it's a little bit varied. I will say I will touch into everything in HR except the payroll side of things. So you know, if the question is if I have really experienced anti-Black racism in the workplace, I will take maybe a couple of minutes and say, perhaps not, but I mean, you know, I've faced some comments. Let's say I will take an example quickly of, you know, a former manager asking me if I was comfortable with deadlines. An example like that. So that might be a simple question for someone, right? So, but for me, a Black woman and, you know, a minority, right? So that question, that landed really differently for me, right? So it's much more, it touches a little bit my values and my identity, right? So as a supervisor or a leader, I would have reframed that question a little bit, like, you know, Jenabu, let's say, you know, you have 2-3 projects on the go, you have a small team, let's say, you know, do you think that we'll be able to meet our deadlines? And I will say our deadlines because, you know, that will be for me a matter of, you know, including myself as a leader in that discussion. So first of all, I would have recognized that there is, you know, an issue of workload. And then I would have recognized that there is, you know, maybe the fact that the team is a small team. And then I would come and say, you know, let's discuss this and have and try and find a solution. And you know, if that was framed like that, it would have landed really better. And in a sense that it would have showed me that that person in particular has empathy, is seeing me, and actually cares, right? So, but you know, just a small example of how those little comments or little things sometimes that are said that shouldn't maybe impact you in a way, but they do impact you. And if they repeat themselves every day, it takes a toll on you and on your mental health. So I won't take a lot of time explaining this or talking about this. This is my introduction. I will let someone else speak. C'était juste un bref message sur un exemple de quelque chose que j'ai vécu qui peut être attribué à quelque chose peut-être comme du racisme ou un exemple de quelque chose comme ça. Je vous laisse la parole. Merci beaucoup. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui.
So thank you. We will indeed be touching upon microaggressions like that. We now have language for those experiences that we may not have recognized before. Thank you so much. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, and thanks, Carla and Liz. Really pleased to be here as part of the panel this afternoon, and to talk about some of my experiences. So I'm Andrew Brown. I'm currently the Director General responsible for employment insurance policy with the Department of Employment and Social Development Canada. And I guess in terms of my experience, I mean, certainly grew up in Canada in sort of a small town with a lot of limited diversity there, I would say, at the time. And, you know, coming out of, I went to both undergraduate and then graduate school in Canada, and joined the public service after that. So for me, it's now been about 20 years in the public service in a variety of different roles, and so certainly be happy to share with you today some of my experiences, both growing up, but also in the public service as well, because I think they're both so important to our own well-being, really, which is what is so important here. So I'll leave it there to start.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And Nadine.
Good day, folks. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Je vais juste mentionner que je suis parfaitement bilingue. Alors, pour les questions, n'hésitez pas de poser des questions dans votre langue de choix. Ça me fait plaisir de répondre. I am a proud public servant, proud to serve the people living in Canada for over 20 years. I have a background of being a bit of a passionate firefighter who doesn't, I'm not the least bit afraid of getting in on the ground floor of change, which has really been a bit of a hallmark of my career. Rights, employee rights, human rights, Indigenous rights, labor rights, they have been a fundamental part of my career over the last 20 years. And most recently in my jobs as the Executive Director for People Management and Community Engagement at OCRO, and now as the Executive Director for Human Resources, Policies, Strategies, and Programs at the RCMP, I continue to shape the foundations of change in the people management space, really focused on ensuring that equity, diversity, and inclusion, anti-racism is embedded in the foundations of our organization so that we are in this generation, those of us who've been around for 20 odd years, that we are in this generation remolding, in a sense, the public service of the future so that it is a better place for those who are coming after us. In terms of experiencing racism in the workplace, well, we all have long stories to tell, and we can tell lots of them. I think the one for me that really resonated for a long time and really had a profound impact on me was around the underemployment that I felt for a long period of time. Well-educated, many times more educated than the folks that I was reporting into, strong leadership capacities, and yet somehow not able to tap into whatever the magic sauce was to actually be able to propel my career forward. And it took me a really long time to figure that piece out. I think the other piece that really had an impact on my mental health was around the hypervigilance that I felt. Never late for a meeting. Better not to show up at all than to walk in the room late. That kind of hypervigilance is really, it does take a toll on you over time. So I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to explore a number of these issues. So I think I'll leave my introduction there. It is an absolute pleasure to be part of this panel this afternoon. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Nadine. I'm sure we will get to expand on many of those experiences that are actually, I'm thinking, very common. Shay. Oh, you're muted, Shay.
Would bypass that. But hi, everyone. My name is Shay Ocribido Malcolm. I'm the Director of National Defense's Anti-Racism Secretariat. An honor to be a part of the panel and part of this conversation. But before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that my remarks are coming from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And I don't say that lightly. I say that as a person in my work now and my work moving forward and in the past, really working in a good way towards the goal of decolonization and reconciliation. So I just wanted to say that up front. I'm a racialized woman with deep roots in the Jamaican and Nigerian culture where my mom and dad immigrated from respectively. My career path, I would say, has been driven mainly by opportunities, but I've also had some challenges along the way too. I would say I've been privileged to have worked with some really great people, some who have really taken an active role in mentoring and sponsoring me. And I look forward to having that conversation on mentoring and sponsorship later on. I started my career 21 years ago, actually this month, as a co-op student in the Public Service Commission. I worked in a program called the Employment Equity Positive Measures Program. And I just find it interesting. At the time, I was tasked to help support my DG respond to Louis Perrenbaum's report, Embracing Change in the Federal Public Service. It was a task force struck to study the participation of visible minorities in the public service. Fast forward 21 years later, and here we are still trying to move the yardstick in increasing participation of racialized people in the public service. And, you know, people may ask what's different today than it was 21 years ago. I would say that I think maybe for the first time, the learner has really finally shown up and is ready to learn. And so I'm going to hold hope on that this time around we can make some meaningful change towards meaningful equity for all. Similar to the other panelists, we could go on and on about different barriers that we faced in our career. Some of us will have faced like the big R kind of overt racist behaviors, but I think many of us too can say that a lot of those barriers or incidences of racism tend to be very pervasive and insidious, and we'll have that conversation on microaggressions, but it's there, it is live and well, and had to navigate through those spaces, understanding the whole conversation of underemployment, watching my cohorts who started at the same time as me, who happen to be white, the vast majority of them tend to be outpacing me level wise, and there's a whole host of reasons for that. But when I look at my Black peers who also started around the same time, and just seeing where we are generally vis-a-vis the others, one could say there are some systemic barriers, and I think it's nice to see the call of action from both the Prime Minister and the clerk to really look at what are some of these barriers, what are some of the sticky points that are preventing representation and mobility of Black people. So yeah, looking forward to having this conversation and sharing some of my experiences in this area.
Thank you so much, Shay. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Let's hear now from our mental health professionals. Boang.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bohan Benedicts. I'm very privileged to live, work, learn, and play on the unceded territory of the Stolo people. And I feel very honored and blessed actually to live here, because the Stolo people are also known as the land people, and they have a particularly strong connection to their land, which for me has been it's been a wonderful chance, because when I first moved here, and I have my little garden in the backyard and I was trying to plant, the soil was not even absorbing the water. And for me, it was very reflective of how the land itself is traumatized and has registered the atrocities that have gone on here. And so for me to be able to work with them and live with them and play with them on this land is a double bind opportunity to heal the people and the land as we integrate with each other. So I am from a very small country. I was born in Canada, and I grew up in a very small country completely surrounded by South Africa called Lesotho. And the one thing that stands out about Lesotho is that A, it's completely surrounded by a superpower in Africa, and B, it's the only country actually that wasn't a colonial country, but was considered a protectorate in the sense that the British had an agreement with our king that, okay, you talk to the outside world while I build my nation. And so it became a place of refuge during what we call the Defekane or Mfekane Wars in Southern Africa. So then in my, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree and honors in psychology, and I have a master's degree in clinical psychology from Trinity Western University here in the Lower Mainland in BC. And the reason I moved actually to Canada was because A, I'm Canadian, but B, when I wanted to pursue my master's level, my university simply said, as an Afrikaner university, they said to me, well, we'd admit 12 students a year if, and depending on the language of the majority of the students who are admitted speak, that would be the medium of instruction. And every year, it's always, the majority is always Afrikaans, which I don't speak. So I didn't have a lot of opportunity there. So I moved back to Canada, and I lived in Toronto on the western side, King and Dufferin, my Parkdale community. They're not very far from Carnage. And so I ran into people that would have been my clients, and I felt at home. I felt at home seeing people misbehave or show their symptoms of the transit. It was totally fine at home. And which I dearly miss. And then I moved out here to do my master's. But so I've been here for almost 10 years in BC. And I worked previously for one of the health authorities in 3 different sites. And my profession, I guess unbeknownst to me, I didn't realize how elitist it is and how very few people are actually trained mental health therapists. And let alone say you dare to say you are a trauma therapist like I do. Because then the mental health system is kind of like a baby of the medical system. And there's not a lot of clinicians, and the funding is unlike what we have for medicine. And so the other thing that I found was that because of that, I was almost always the only Black person, either on the team or in the whole building, or even holding more of a non-cleaning janitorial position. And that bothered me on many levels. I'll talk a little bit about that. This whole idea of being the only one who's Black, being the only one who actually has a paid profession above the minimum wage, and also coming from an elitist and kind of specialized background, what I've seen in the healthcare field. But other than that, needless to say, I've experienced quite a bit of anti-Black racism from some of my colleagues choosing to cross the street when they see me walking during lunch break, to being greeted with, "Oh, it's you," by people who actually I've been in the same company for years and years and worked at the same site for years. And so that's in a nutshell my story. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much, Bohang. Aisha, last but not least.
Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for this great opportunity. I'm very honored to be here, and I want to begin with acknowledging the unceded territories on which I work and play, and I'm grateful for that. So you've got my name already. I'm the Black African woman, and by that I mean I was born in Ghana, West Africa. I had the honor of being sent to London, UK to go and study. And by that I mean as the first child on African parents, and the responsibility was on me to take care of my family. So to cut the story short, as the first girl, I was told, you're just a girl, you don't need to go to school because you're eventually just going to get married. So my younger brothers and sisters were sent to school. I was not sent. I was sent to that building where we call the makeshift building. It's not even a building. If I'm sure you, those of you will get my drift. So anyway, I was in London. My dad, a banker, my dad was my role model. and I aspired to be like my dad, and he was a banker. For that reason, I went into accounting. I studied accounting for many years whilst in London and taking care of my brothers and sisters. And I was sent to London because my dad died and my mom got the health benefit. And so she said, okay, we're using this money to pay for your fees to go to London to study. And the responsibility on you as a 17-year-old is to send money back and take care of everybody. And that was a huge trust that was laid upon me at the age of 17. So my story begins from there. And I knew that being there means that I had to really focus because I could not afford to let my family down, as it were. So in London, I started studying, I started working, I was in accounting. To cut the story short, one day somebody who had trained came back from lunch, put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, what are you doing? He's looked at my computer and I turned to him. Since when did you have to ask me what am I doing? He said to me, I am a Don. I have a degree. You don't have one. I'm like, interesting. That was it. I went home. I told my husband, you know what? I want to go back to school. I want to go and study. He said, well, what took you so long? I've been telling you, you're not listening to me. Anyway, I went back. I applied for Goldsmith University in London to get a degree in social work. I applied. I got unconditional offer. I started studying. And then to again, fast forward. And then I finished the course. The course was intense. The most amazing thing in my study of social work is understanding myself. That's why I react that way. That's why my mom disciplined me this way. Oh my goodness, I got to understand who I am and what made me function the way I was. So moving forward, I'm still married, 2 young children. I came to Canada. So I thought I got a bachelor's degree, I'm going to be good. I got a shock of my life. Oh, no. It doesn't work that way. You apply, I'm not getting a job. So even though I've got a bachelor's in degree and in UK standard, I'm a hot cake, social workers is in demand. I applied for a job in Canada, I wasn't getting the job. So it's all what we call step down. I applied as a support worker role to get my foot into the door, as it were, and then started. Again, halfway through, I go, you know what, sorry, Aisha, we're gonna let you go. I mean, how come? We're displacing you. What does that even mean in my language? Well, because some is seniority, they explain blah, blah, blah to me. But again, with fortitude, mental fortitude, resilience. Remember what I said? I was sent to UK to take care of my family. There's something that I had to keep focused on because I cannot afford to let it go. So what does that mean? Well, you don't have masters. Okay, I applied yet again. And I was fortunate. That house university took me. I went to get my master's. I got my master. I'm like, life is gonna be easy now. But guess what? It wasn't easy. So like I'm doing well, I'm doing my work. Okay, I've got my master's. I started applying, wouldn't get the job. And then I got to find out what is called courtesy interview. We just have to interview her just for courtesy, but we're really not gonna give her the job. But based on that principle, again, with my life experience, not getting what I want, and like I always have to keep upping my game. I'm sure we're going to be discussing that today as we go along. I have to maintain focus and ground myself constantly and remember, why am I doing what I'm doing? So I've given you already what I do, my career path, as it were, and more recently I've been applying for director roles too. And guess what? I don't get the job. I'll keep applying. They said, I'll give you a feedback. Yet they'll give the job to somebody. And then it's, Aisha, we would really like you to train this person. I'm like, that's interesting. I didn't get the job yet. I have to train that person. But yeah, you have to do it with a smile, like you're all smiling nicely. Sure, of course. And then we guide the person to go. So yet, with each stumbling block that I face, I keep thinking, what do I do to up my game? So recently, I am now also, I'm happy to share with you, or I'm a candidate for the Canadian Health Executive Program, and that's something I'm aspiring to. In the meantime, because of the stumbling blocks that I've been given in every aspect, I decided to open up my own private practice as a way of helping the community, because I have so much skills. Why should I sit behind a desk and approve people's vacation or have disciplinary interviews, where I can help the community. And it has been my joy, my passion that I'm helping the community to, to get the skills, consult them, tell them, when you're going to the meeting, this is how you carry yourself. This is how you prepare before you go. So I'm using that to help my community. When it talks about discrimination, lived experience, I don't think you have the time. There's not enough hours in the day for us to tell you that. But all I can say is I have experienced it and I continue to experience it today. But what keeps me going? This is what I want to end on. To remember that it doesn't matter what you throw at me. All I ask for is to breathe. As long as I can breathe, I pray for opportunity to breathe. As long as I can breathe, I'm gonna keep going. And I have a 23-year-old boy and a 19-year-old. So I have two Black boys, and I'm teaching them these skills of how to be grounded. So whatever I'm going through today, my experience that I'm sharing with you, I'm also sharing with my family to help them to grow. And I want to end on this. I thank you for this forum. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to share in my experience and learn as we work together in this community. On that note, I thank you all.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. So that's who we have. Now we have, it looks like we have 457 participants at this point. So I'll just talk really briefly about how we're going to go on today. We've got the Q&A section, and I see we already have 6 questions. What we're going to do first, though, is have a conversation with our panelists and then get to the Q&A section. I just have to warn you, though, that priority will be given to questions that do refer to mental health issues as opposed to career development. So if the two are connected, then and they have been given priority, we'll certainly go there. But let's get started. So we've heard, I know when Shay was speaking, we heard specifically Shay use the term visible minority, and then she moved to racialized people. So we've had our language change quite a bit. We used to be visible minorities, then we were people of color. Then the division was made, and we started to hear the phrase BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The clerk's message, the clerk's call to action that Minister Hussein referenced, very specifically mentioned Black people, Indigenous, and people of color as 3 separate categories, because the recognition is now that we do have different issues that affect us as opposed to other people of color. So I'm going to put this question actually to all of the panelists, whoever wishes to answer this. Could you provide us with an example of how anti-Black racism can manifest in the workplace? So if you want to just sort of stick your hand up, I'll call on you, and you can give an example if you have an example to give. Thank you, Nadine.
Thanks very much, folks. So it's always a controversial thing to ask a panel of people, to come forward and sort of point the finger at, what is something that is really anti-Black racism in the workplace. I think that it is it's a challenging question to answer, because so many things can be, depending on who you are and what your level of resilience is to the issues around you. I don't think that as Black people, we all respond to the same, in the same way to the issues that we face. So I think it's really important to, whilst we have there is a commonality around anti-Black racism and anti-racist or racist behavior in the workplace, I think it's important to acknowledge and understand that everybody deals with that, those instances differently, and they have a different weight at different times. So for myself, for instance, I once worked in an organization where an individual really just truly micromanaged me. Like, she just, would walk by my office every 5 minutes, and I had a job that required me to build partnerships. So you can imagine how often I was in my office if I was building partnerships. I was out in the world building partnerships. And she sort of made a point of, watching what time I came in, what time I left, how, and sort of essentially accused me of squandering my time in the office. That was probably one of the most affronting experiences of my career, in part because I am, without overstating it at all, very performant. I love results. I have a huge drive, and I like to get things done. And so I was faced in that situation with experiencing that in a very racist way, because it's not the way that she treated other people. She was a white woman, and was faced with really needing to figure out how to navigate that situation. And so, in addition to the hurt and the anger and the sense of injustice that came along with that experience, also came I don't know what you're talking about, and I'm going to prove you wrong. And so I sat down with my performance agreement and what my accomplishments were supposed to be at the end of the year, and demonstrated to her that I had met them all in 3 months. And that was why I wasn't sitting in my office every time she walked by and she wanted to see me. So I think what I'm trying to say is anti-Black racism manifests itself sometimes in what other people would regard as just common actions, but it impacts the individual differently. And I think that it is important to be true to the experience that you're having in that moment, to attribute to it exactly as much energy as you need to be able to move past it. And then if the opportunity presents itself, to take ownership back of yourself so that you're not left feeling victimized from the situation. I hope that's useful to the conversation.
Oh, indeed, indeed. Thank you. Anyone else want to talk about anti-Black racism? Perhaps talk about what the difference is. What's the difference between standard racism and anti-Black racism as we perceive it? Because Nadine makes a very good point about perception being a giant part of this. Andrew.
So thanks, Carla. And I don't know necessarily that I can speak specifically to how you might differentiate anti-Black racism versus racism more generally, but certainly speaking to the Black experience. And I think one of the ways that it can manifest itself in the workplace certainly relate to exactly what Nadine was saying. And I think also, I think about these situations where for example, people do think about the different kinds of HR processes and hiring processes and what happens there. And I think all things being equal, there can be these situations then where now you've got two candidates. One's a Black candidate and one's not. And then all of a sudden, what are some of the preconceived notions that people may have with respect to Black people, with respect to how well they can perform? And so they may be sometimes unconsciously, not sort of deliberately discriminating against one person so much as preferentially providing some kind of treatment to the other person, higher expectations of another person despite equal performance. And so while they may not have deliberately attempted to discriminate against a Black person, the outcome is the same. If they've selected the other person based on their conscious or unconscious biases, there's the discrimination against the Black person. I think, my experience in the public service, there have been a lot of different times where, when you're working with people that it's one thing. They've already gotten to know you. You're sort of a known quantity. Once you're dealing with people outside of that usual sphere, so other people, other parts of the government, sometimes external to government, then suddenly, as you're unknown, any preconceived notions may come into play. And there have been times where I'll show up in a meeting, let's say, and people don't know that I'm the Director General. So people wouldn't take me as the Director General. They would take me as someone as being of a much lesser importance in that situation in terms of my position. and then you will see at a certain point how others react to that situation when you can see someone's misjudged and no one's quite sure exactly how to react. Ooh, this person's going to be a little embarrassed with themselves once they find out that's actually the Director General. So just giving examples of these sorts of situations where I've often seen that Black people are in some way, the expectations of a Black person are less, in a sense, that they can perform it or do less than another person until you can prove them otherwise. So that's one of the sort of barriers I think that continues to exist for many people, Black people in particular, and I'm sure could potentially be a barrier to people with other sorts of characteristics as well.
Merci bien, Andrew. Actually, if we can move on to the second question with Liz, we'll come back to this. Definitely Aisha and Bohang, I see you there. So Liz, perhaps we can move to the second question now?
Thank you very much. I will ask the second question to Djenabou, and I will ask it in French, because as we were getting ready for this event, I remembered some expressions that we say in French, such as when you work extra hard. In English, you say that you work your head or something else off. In French, you say travailler comme un, I don't want to say the N word. When you work hard and you see somebody else taking credit for your work, in English, you would say to have a ghostwriter, while in French, you would say avoir un, again, the N word. So here is a question for you, Djenabou, in French. Une croyance commune dans la communauté noire est que nous devons travailler 2 fois plus fort, 2 fois plus pour être reconnus pour le même travail. Comment cette croyance affecte-t-elle les employés noirs dans le milieu de travail?
Mais en fait, je commencerai par dire que c'est difficile de dire que c'est une croyance quand c'est vraiment la perception d'une personne. Lorsque c'est ta perception, c'est ta réalité en quelque sorte. Donc, je dirais que, ici, tout le monde sur la table, on a eu des expériences, comme tu le mentionnes, où est-ce qu'on travaille et où est-ce qu'on se sent, on sent qu'on n'est pas reconnu pour le travail ou la valeur du travail qu'on apporte. Donc, c'est très répandu. Et d'ailleurs, dans nos propres familles, on voit qu'avec nos jeunes filles, nos enfants à la maison, on commence à leur dire « Travaille bien à l'école parce qu'il faut que tu travailles 2-3 fois plus dur. Quand tu vas aller au milieu de travail, ça va être très difficile parce que tu vas travailler 3-4 fois avant qu'on ne te redonne la valeur d'un travail que quelqu'un d'autre fait une seule fois ou 2 fois. » Donc, je crois que c'est très, très important. Et comment on dit ça? The recognition is so important. It's such an important phase for your work that it should be, for me personally, something that we should embed and integrate at the forefront of the employment, the employee life cycle. We should, as we talk about performance agreements, we talk about feedback, we talk about those things. So why not bring recognition, at the onboarding level, where we're going to have that conversation with our employee or our new employee? Hey, how would you like to be recognized? Because that can be completely different for each and every one of us here. Like I can be just satisfied with a pat on the back or an email like in my inbox, right? Someone else might need, at the team meeting, it would be nice to say, I did well on XYZ project. And someone else will be, I'm shy enough, just call me in your office, let's have a chat. So I think that's important. Like we talk about setting objectives, setting priorities. So I think at the same importance and having that recognition talk and having that as something that can be an ongoing thing will be really important. Because, as you mentioned, Liz, lorsque tu travailles et que tu n'es pas reconnu, c'est là que tu commences à prendre vraiment un recul. Donc, tu te positionnes, tu restes vraiment éloigné et tu ne te sens plus faire partie de la communauté ou de la famille, de l'organisation. Donc, tu commences à te faire des idées et puis tu commences à vraiment sentir un poids mental parce qu'on veut quand même, you know, your self-worth, right? And you want to know that you are contributing. And, you know, when you feel like you are doing that much and that someone else next to you is really getting the recognition, but you are not. And so the other thing that I will mention on that will be really, we as leaders, we need to come up with a way to understand that we can no longer lead people the way we used to. And we cannot say that, you know, we are going to apply the same type of style and leadership, you know, across the board. Our employees are diverse, so we need to adapt our leadership style. So as I mentioned on that recognition piece, we are all different. So we respond differently, right? So it's the same. We have to come in with different way of doing it and tailor it. My God, we have to tailor it. If we come in and just want to apply that same brush to everyone, we will fail because we are different. You know, I will be a shy employee. You will be out there, outgoing. And sometimes, you know, the loudest in the room, right? We all know that, right? We'll be the one that people will be looking at. You know, the silent one is sitting there, but they are contributing, but their work is not being seen. And I can definitely say that that can take a toll on your mental health. And you know, more and more you can see that employee really not participating in things, right? And you know, and retracting themselves and feeling completely outside the, you know, the family, the work environment. So I will say, you know, the emotional intelligence that is required for leaders today is really, really important, and it will be impactful. So we don't, and I hear leaders often say, you know what, that's a lot of hand holding. Well, we will have to do it. In nowadays, I mean, you know, people are looking at that, right? It's the support, the emotional support that you can bring on the table. Like a lot of things, a lot of people can do the physical work, right? But it's not that. You're looking for a leader that will actually see you, right? And that just sometimes takes a form of, how are you? How are you doing? How can I help you? You know, you're working on this project, you work on that project, and asking them how you can recognize them. And I think you can start by that example of how you can approach them and ask them how you can tailor that to them. I think c'est ce que je peux dire sur ce sujet-là, mais c'est effectivement quelque chose qui peut impacter l'employé dans le sens, dans le sens de la santé mentale, parce qu'on se sent vraiment rejeté quand on n'est pas reconnu dans le milieu de travail. Merci.
Thank you very much, Jenabu. I am confident that team leaders, managers, directors, and other executives took note of what you said. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for speaking to the concept that our perception is often that we have to work twice as hard to get recognized for doing half as much. And I think we heard Nadine speak to that earlier as well. We also have to consider the effect of intersectionality on an issue like that it can be significantly more impactful for Black women, especially. Thank you so much. I see you there, Aisha. Hi, did you have something you wanted to add before we move on?
Yes, if it's okay. I would like to add two comments regarding this question. And thank you for the two leaders who have made a comment. And the first point I want to add to that is based on the critical race theory, we know that racism and anti-racism is very pervasive and permanent in society today. And all of us, leaders included, accepting this reality of where this comes from, the need to work hard, twice as hard, is accepting this reality of low income, Black people's trajectory, housing, all of these are things that are impacting it. And countless research studies have emphasized that the way Black people are perceived as lack of competence, the stereotypes that we are lazy, we are stupid, and lack of good faith, and the expectation that we are going to fail deems us to be able to continue to work twice as hard. However, the intervention, as already mentioned, just for emphasis, is leaders need to recognize the Black experience. Leaders need to be curious, learn, and be intentional, very intentional, by employing Black people, inviting them to the meetings to gain a deeper understanding of Black professionals, because you are losing a lot of potentials. that people can put to the table. I'm mindful of time, so tell me if it's too much, I will always stop.
Hey, thank you so much for that. That was important. Andrew, so congratulations on your recent promotion. It was fantastic to hear about that. We were discussing a couple of weeks ago, actually, about the need for massive cultural change across Canada at large, so that when young Black people join the civil service, they already have that self of pride and are able to speak proactively. They're able to advocate for themselves. Until that time, I'm going to ask a question here. We also have a question actually in the Q&A section about absorbing and internalizing racism and tokenism. Thank you so much, anonymous person who's posted this, having experienced over time being overqualified but afraid to move up. So what advice would you give to new or potential Black public servants coming in?
Great, and thanks for that question, or a couple of questions there, Carla. I think that, one, really now is the time in the public service. I think we've heard some of that already in terms of what the Prime Minister and the Clerk have said. And I believe that we're actually starting to see that change. We heard that the language about the learner has shown up. So in terms of you referring to promotion, and thanks for that, I was just named last week as a new Assistant Deputy Minister at Employment and Social Development Canada. So that's going to start in about 2 weeks, actually exactly 2 weeks from today. So a new role for me. But I think, really one of the important things, and bringing it back a little bit to mental health is, who would have thought that? Especially to put a different lens on it, and you had just spoken to the situation of Black women, but in terms of Black men, I might argue, especially as a child, that expectations may be lowest on Black boys than perhaps any other group. And so this is where I think it is really so important that, addressing issues in broader Canadian society really need to start with children. And when I talk about children, I don't mean only Black children, I mean all children. I think one of the really important things there is that representation matters. And for me, certainly growing up was in Canada. But in terms of, all of the leaders that I saw back then, they would have all been white people largely at that point. Leaders in all ways, and at all sort of levels, whether you're thinking about someone like a prime minister, or whether you're thinking about a teacher or a police officer, the people in your community, those were all white people. The people on television, they were all white people. So the only representation really of Black people at the time was of, I suppose, athletes and entertainers, and everything else was negative. So criminals, essentially. That's what you saw. That was sort of the image. And so that sort of, I think for me personally, was telling me or informing me about what I could do or what I could expect. And I think it's also important because it wasn't just for me as a young Black person in Canada, it was on every young person in Canada, what they could expect for or of a Black person. And those are really some of the same barriers that we're continuing to deal with today, some of these preconceived notions. So, just to say, I think that lack of representation was very problematic. I think it's something that's much better today, but it's something that we're continuing to work with, and it is something that has such an important impact on one's view of what the possibilities are for them, of their self-esteem, and so forth. So, I know that these are still issues. I find, part of just living in the country is you deal with people of all ages as well. And, I know absolutely if I run into, a young child, let's say age 8, I had this experience maybe back in the summer, happened to be going swimming. And the first question from him was, are you a football player? That's the kind of microaggression that ticks me off, and I'll leave it there.
I'm 6 feet tall and I'm Black, so for me it was basketball. And no, I don't play basketball, as a matter of fact. Thanks for asking. Le quatrième question, Liz, s'il vous plaît. Oh, mute.
Thank you very much. This question will be, I will address it in French to Nadine, because we know that as an executive director in the HR field, we know that it is important to hear your answer to this question. So Nadine, here's my question to you. Que signifie pour vous l'expression ou le mot microagression ou macroagression?
Merci pour la question. Je vais dire que à la fonction publique, nous vivons en tant que des Noirs, des microagressions chaque jour. On a toujours des commentaires en tant que femme noire par rapport à mes cheveux. Si je change le style de mes cheveux, il y a des questions. Comment est-ce que tu fais ça? C'est incroyable. C'était différent que hier. C'est incroyable. On a aussi des attentes spécifiques au niveau de notre statut familial. Les assumptions que je ne suis pas mariée, que je suis femme célibataire, que je suis maman monoparentale, tous ces genres de suppositions, et aussi des commentaires qui suggèrent que c'est la couleur de mon peau et non mon excellence qui a contribué à mes accomplissements. So, you know, when you think about the concept of microaggressions, it's some, you know, basic things that I think that we can all sort of point to. I think what's interesting for me in terms of the microaggressions conversation, though, is that it's often juxtaposed as a Black-white thing, that Black people are sort of experiencing microaggressions at the hands of white people. And I think that I'll take this opportunity to talk really clearly about the microaggressions that exist intraculturally. So one racialized or person of color versus Blacks. The question we had a little bit earlier was, what's the difference between racism and anti-Black racism? And I say that in my view, and it ties very much into the microaggressions and the whittling down of your mental well-being as a result of those microaggressions, is that all cultures have internalized an anti-Black consciousness. I think all cultures have internalized the race and criminality narrative that follows Black people. And so when we think about what is good, I mean, folks, particularly North Americans, understand the light is right kind of concept, right? The fairer your skin is, the better off you are as a Black person and or a person of color. Well, those messages are also ingrained in other ethnic groups and in other people of culture. So you can have other racialized groups perpetuating microaggressions against Black people, and they need to be addressed as well. I think when I think about microaggressions, and certainly from a human resources context, and as I sort of work with the folks in my organization and outside of my organization to sort of continue, and I say continue because I really do believe that we're making a shift. I agree with Andrew. And 20 years of my life can't be in vain. We are making a shift in the public service that really sort of encourages all of us, each and every one of us, to think about who we are. This is a time for deep self-reflection around, where did we come from? Who sat at our dinner table? Who did our friends invite? Who did our parents invite over as friends to their homes? All of these experiences shape who we are, and they shape how we think about other people. And I think that none of us escape this. This is we're on a learning continuum together. And I think that when we talk about microaggressions in the public service, it is not just a Black and white thing. We have to be thinking about how other cultures have also internalized anti-Black discourse. When it comes to macroaggressions, quite honestly, I haven't seen a lot of that in the public service. Like it's a rare occasion, and certainly I haven't experienced it. I'm not suggesting that it never happens, but I have not in the public service been diminished by the use of that one word that is, that can turn the most senior person in a room into a quivering mass. I'm pleased to say that I haven't experienced that, but I have experienced what Andrew talked about in terms of walking into a meeting and, the host just walking right past me, not recognizing that I was actually the most senior person representing the public service at that time. It happens. And it's about how, from a mental health perspective, it's being able to name it, it's being able to process it, and it's being able to let it go, because it can become incredibly insidious. You tackle it, in my mind, you tackle it when the moment presents itself to tackle it. You deliver it, and I generally do. I find a way through humor because I have to let it go. I know it when I see it. And when I sat down to chair that meeting after someone had walked by me, I don't remember quite what I said, but I said something to take back the space that was mine. And you can do that respectfully and with self-respect. And so macroaggressions, microaggressions, they're a reality that we are going to continue to live in the public service, but it's better. And that is the key message, when we talk about what advice we would give new public servants. The public service today is better than it was 20 years ago. And when you come into the public service, bring your best self. Every day, bring your best self. It's the best that you can do for yourself, and you're there to serve the people of Canada. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Liz, if you don't mind, do you mind if I can just jump in on that just to build on what Nadine was saying?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I concur with what Nadine said. And the other thing I would just bring to the conversation is the defining of microaggressions. Who defines what is a microaggression versus a macroaggression? And I would argue that an aggression is an aggression. And for those who are the recipient of the aggression, it doesn't matter if it's micro or macro, it's just an aggression. And that we just need to be careful that we don't, in our language, diminish the harm that an aggression can cause a person. In terms of, yes, I do think we're at an inflection point. I do think the learner has finally shown up to learn. And I think the public service is a better place for new Black public servants entering now than it was 21 years ago when I first joined. I would agree with Nadine's advice to bring your best self forward every day. And it doesn't matter where you are. If you're invited to the table, own your space. Put your elbows out and own that space. You're there for a reason. You're there for your opinions, your values. You bring insight to the organization just based on who you are, your experience, your academics, whatever brought you to that table. And so just to encourage new public servants to not only bring their best selves, but own the space that they are occupying. And I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much, Shay. Basically, what I hear from you is be unapologetic about who you are, because nobody did you a favor. You deserve to be here. Be seen, be heard, be proud of who you are. Thank you.
Bohang, you've got something? I do want to touch on what Shay just said, but let's hear from you on micro and macro aggressions.
Thank you very much, Carla, and thank you to Nadine and Shay and everyone who's spoken before me. I just wanted to clarify a little bit from a mental health perspective, how we and the psychological impact of what microaggressions and macroaggressions mean. So the classic definition of macroaggression is any act, whether verbal, nonverbal, or environmental, that is blatant and overt, and that is racist towards another person or discriminatory in a negative way. So it's never positive, it's never warranted, and it is from an internalized bias, which is a thought, an idea that someone holds about a group of people. So it's generalized. For example, in my workplace, there was the only other Black person who was in leadership is a Black man, and who doesn't even work in the same site as I am. And so there is this underlying message that I don't belong, and that makes me feel unsafe. And so it is an environmental macro aggression. And that is why schools as well are unsafe places for our children. The second thing I wanted to touch on is what a classic definition of a microaggression is. And these are typically insidious. So it's almost like a needle poke every day. Something happens here, 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 here. And at the end of the day, it has built up into a bigger wound that we are carrying around with us. And so to say that it is a once-off incident, and I can easily deal with it and let it go or move on, it doesn't speak to the gravity of it. That it at the end of the day, what it sends, the message it sends to someone's brain is that I am unsafe, I am unwelcome here, I do not belong, I have a particular place that I should go back to because this is not my belonging. And so that is where it ties into the psychological unsafety, which simply put is that the fear centers in the brain of an individual experiencing these aggressions, micro doesn't matter, they are highlighted and triggered. Mm-hmm. And automatically when the brain does that, it shuts off the logic and reasoning, the frontal lobe. And so because the brain deems a danger. And when the brain deems a danger, it has only three options: fight, flee, freeze. Am I gonna play dead? Or can I fight this thing? Or can I outrun it? And so, because the workplace is a place that I can't run away from, I can't play dead, and I cannot be aggressive, especially if I'm a Black woman, because I'm already deemed aggressive, that I don't really have any options. And so we internalize this fear and we live in this high adrenaline brain zone that is toxic to the brain.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Bohang. I was going to take a question actually from the Q&A, but I think I will leave that and get back to those questions in just a moment. I first want to ask Shay about what organizations change, what they should change rather, in order to create a culture of inclusivity and psychologically safe work environments, since we're already along that track. So we're talking about inclusivity and psychologically safe work environments for Black employees, as befits your directorship and your position at work. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. So I know from the work that I'm doing with the Anti-Racism Secretariat at National Defense, really the idea is to shine a Black light onto the organization. And I use the word Black light deliberately in the sense that Black light really is an ultraviolet light that's invisible to the human eye, but when it's lit, in essence, it illuminates what you can't see. And so the idea is to really shine a Black light on where are the barriers, the sticky points within an organization that's really preventing the promotion, career development, and mobility of our people. And so I would say that in terms of what organizations can do, it's really digging deep and taking a serious review and audit of their current policies, practices that really shape the institution. I believe if you take care of your current people right now, so really looking at those barriers that do impact mobility, career development, and promotion, if you're able to remove those barriers and make it a more inclusive place for your current people, then in turn, essentially or ideally, it would be that they would become your best recruitment and retention strategy moving forward. So I would encourage organizations to dig deep, to shine that black light within their organization, to see where those sticky points are. I think a lot of organizations are doing good work, but they're not necessarily seeing the return on their investment for the level of effort that they're putting in. And I would say that the gap or that missing piece is really that the policy measures that they're putting in place are not necessarily grounded or informed by the people who are being affected by the system or who those policies are trying to support. And so I would also encourage organizations to really tap in to their advisory groups, their employee networks, to really get a sense, and not just to consult at the end of designing a policy measure, but bring them in right up from the design stage. Like, we need to, for this moment in time, possibly move away from consultation to more co-creation. And so those are some of the things I would put out there that organizations can do. I think it's really important too, maybe one last thing, is to really try to build the intercultural intelligence competencies of the organization. And when I say intercultural intelligence, just what I mean is really saying, understand that you are seeing the world from your cultural reference point, and others have their own cultural reference point. And when those two cultural reference points intersect, it can have one of two reactions. It can either cause a pain point, or it can cause a positive reaction in a positive direction. And so what we need from our leaders is to have that competency or foresight to be able to see that space and be able to leverage and negotiate that space in a positive way forward. So building the intercultural competencies of our leaders, I think, is very important as well. I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks so much. There's been quite a few questions about that in the Q&A section. So you've touched on that. Perhaps we'll expand later. But Jenabu, did you want to comment on that?
Sorry. Yes, I just wanted to add on that I say, Shay, I agree on that. And my organizations, the two agencies I'm working for right now, NSERC and CERC, are actually conducting a culture audit. And the objective of that is basically understand what the culture is right now before moving forward and creating, those policies and programs. Yes, we'll do an employment system review, but then the culture piece is important to understand, right? Because that's where, the unspoken rules are, right? How we treat our people every day, how the interactions happen, right? So we need to bring in the right people to the right tables and have those conversations and understand what is happening in the organization and how we can design and build those policies and programs around that and make sure that there is accountability for it. So I will also say it on the cultural piece that we need to model, or us leaders, we need to model like the behavior we want our employees, to see and to mimic, right? So if we tolerate certain behaviors, of course, they will continue. And that, you often see that we say that our employees are our most valuable, assets and all that, that language that we use typically, right? So show it to the employees, show it by, by saying, no matter who you are in this organization, no matter what your rank is, if you behave in a certain way, well, there will be consequences. And you have to do that and show them to it and not, condone those behaviors because that leader or that person is a high performer. They have an impact on your bottom line, and that's, you perpetuate it and you let it go because of that. And that, Black employees or employees in general, they see through that, like the hypocrisy of that, right? This side talking about how you value them, and the other side, letting them certain behavior impact their mental health, right? So I think we owe it to our employees to actually understand what our culture is, but because I don't think we all do. We don't understand what goes on every day. So we have to take the time and to go through that exercise of finding out what's happening before putting things in place to eradicate those behaviors. Thank you.
Time to hold some hands to the fire, it sounds like, Jenabu. Responsibility, accountability. So Bohang and Aisha, I'd just like you to hang on to your ideas for a moment, because there are two questions in the Q&A that tie in very well to the next question that I would like you to speak directly to. And I think that our ideas might flow here very well. So first we have a comment from Victoria Kayuni, who says, I would be interested to know how best to advocate for ourselves. Those of us who have 15 plus years of experience, advanced educational training, and lived experience, finding themselves outpaced by peers with the same or less credentials. How to remain resilient, which speaks to the mental health aspect. How do we keep strong and confident our value and abilities to advance our careers? I'd also like you to consider Marc Gagnon's question. Marc Gagnon is asking, how would you describe the leadership challenge for the entirety of the federal public service, with respect to the role of empathy and why it matters when discussing systemic racism and its impact on our mental health, well-being, and inclusivity? And the next question was actually, what are the most common coping mechanisms to deal with anti-Black racism in the workplace? So how can we cope as employees? How can we cope and advance in this community of in this experience that we're having right now? So Aisha, I'd like you to invite you to go first, and then we'll hear from Bohang.
So, am I addressing the question you just answered?
All of it. that was a big old question. So if you can find a few loose ends in there, but the idea really is, how do we keep strong? How do we keep strong? What are some coping mechanisms for employees in this culture that we find ourselves in right now?
All right. So the first one I'm thinking about when it comes to the coping aspect, actually, let me keep my train of thought and I'll come back to the coping. So the first one I want to mention is by the inclusiveness. First, I want to direct to the leaders and the managers and co-workers and other minorities who are not just Black. One, we have to prioritize what is called the humanity, to work with each other by respecting the history, our Black people's life experiencing, acknowledging it. During the recruitment and retention, be mindful of how we're doing them. Don't go by the person's name just because they don't sound Caucasian. Don't go by that. So consider the recruitment and retention. Identify the values and practices that have advantaged white people and others to the exclusion of oppressing others. So clearly identify what is happening. Start from the top-up approach. So by that, I mean leaders understand the history, interrogate their own biases, build empathy and respect for others. Be vulnerable. Say what you don't know. I don't know. Yes, I dropped the ball. Yes, I messed up. I'm sorry. I want to work on this. How can I make this better? Just say it as it is. Don't be defensive and put things under the table. We also need to, when I say we, I feel like I'm part of you, but I think I am part of you, if you don't mind me saying. We need to review the hiring process by being inclusive, embrace conflict. When there's a conflict that lands at the HR table, don't be defensive. Oh my God, the Black person is already the bad person. Do you know what I mean? Be open, be curious during the HR investigation. Go towards mediation rather than who am I going to discipline? Who am I going to provide the letter of expectation to? What am I going to do? As a leader, be open and curious. And also, what else am I thinking? Engage the staff. We can't be all the hierarchy. Engage the ask people, what ideas do they have? Go around the table, let people talk. And be quiet, let them speak up and bring the ideas forward. You'll be surprised yet again how much potential your staff have that you're not tapping into. So that's one aspect. I want to go next to the resilience. And I'm breathing for a reason. I have to hold my breath. Resilience. Resilience is a huge one. Knowing, just like I already said, trauma all the experience from intergeneration trauma. Yes, we're in Canada. Working in this environment comes with a huge trauma. If 95% of the society has experienced some trauma one way or the other, that means us, your staff, your colleagues, your leaders have experienced trauma. Now, if you're a Black person, Black, female, double, triple, tenfold army, that means the trauma level is even more so. So the question is, what do we do? What are some of the coping mechanisms that you have in place? One on the micro level, on an individual level, and then on an organization level. I'll go for the micro individual. We as an individuals have to be mindful of ourselves. We know when your button is pressed. No, you know yourself. Be mindful to know how you're coping, what has been triggered in you, and be really self-care is very important. And there's a research based on this too. We know that, imagine the mason jar, okay? So we have the trauma experience, all the things already, the blue pebbles, and then stress at work, and work environment, and that's the green pebbles in the jar. If the jar becomes full and it overflows, that is where we have the breakdown. And we don't want that. So we have to, for resilience, what can you do? We have to make our jar taller. By that, 3 things, simple things to start with: sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Make sure you're taking the time to make sure of this. So that means you're literally making your jar taller, so you're less likely to have a breakdown, as it were. Does that make sense? And you know what you do, go to bed early. Sometimes I know because of COVID, the gyms are closed. Even if walking with the mask on, going for a walk, 20 minutes a day is so huge. There's so much research on that. Mindfulness, before you go, when you wake up, actually before you even get up from the bed, this is what based on dialectical behavior therapy. And DBT focuses on 4 areas: interpersonal skills, mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotional regulation. And one of the things that will help you, even before you get out of the bed, is it's like this, the half smile. Now watch my face carefully. I'm doing this. So I do the half smile, and do it with me. And then you breathe in and out. Maintaining the half smile again and out. And as we do that, the brain, the neurobiology of the brain actually feels you're smiling, you're good. So it helps our nervous system, because trauma is in our nervous system. So to minimize the trauma in the nervous system, to get rid of that and have the positive energy in our nervous system, we have to practice this. That's a small part of that. And then the piece that I want to add is the resilience. We all have resilience. To cope in this resilience, identify things that you can do. If you're struggling in the work environment to manage the politics, look out for somebody that you respect, who is very good in managing the political aspects in the work. Does that make sense? I just checking if I'm making sense so far. And identify that person. Keep that person in your back pocket. If you're struggling to have a sense of humor and laugh, find someone who has great sense of humor, hold out to that person. And choose 3 areas that you're struggling with. And these people can be your connection. You connect to them. So I'm looking at Shay. Hey, Shay, oh my word, I have this meeting to go to. I'm really struggling. I don't know how to manage the politics. Andrew is going to be there. Who else is going to be there? Nadine is going to be there. How do I manage this politics? And then you're going to say, you can do this. This is how you ground yourself. Even in the interaction, you're already helping me to build my resilience. So I think I'll let others comment, but I hope that gives a few brief points to manage the workplace, the resilience, and how to cope.
That's really speaking to having horizontal mentors, people that you can check in with and touch base with before you have important meetings, etc. And Bohang, if you can just very briefly also address that so that we can get on to some of these exciting questions here in the Q&A.
So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who spoke before me. I won't be long, but I have a few points I wanted to drive home. One of the most important things is to realize that all the systems that are in place in the world right now were all built on colonialism, all built with the mentality to have at the top of that system a white male, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in South Africa, even whether you're in Lesotho. And what this implies to our workplace, everyone who is here on this call, is that the system, when it's working efficiently, will keep the Black person at the bottom and will keep the white person at the top, whether we like it or not. And this is the secret and how anyone can get rid of a Black person in their workplace. All they have to do is use the system in place. Even the respectful workplace policies, when you look at them, if someone doesn't say something overtly racist, they don't use the N-word. All they have to say is that, oh, Bo was screaming. Even if Bo is soft-spoken, even if everybody is begging Bo to raise her voice so they can hear her. 1 minute, one white guy or one white woman cries and says, Bo screamed at me. Oh, that's it. That's it. She has been disrespectful. So all workplaces to counteract colonialism, we need a psychological safety workplace in every team, every company, every department. There is no other way to go about it because the systems themselves have been built on wrong and discriminatory practices. And we need an alternative policy to come in that will be an overriding policy, how we treat our human resource. And I will say this, if you try as any person to protest or advocate for yourself that you're experiencing racism at work, and you use and follow the respectful workplace policy, that policy is not sufficient to prove what you're saying because it needs the act to be blatant and overt. A respectful, an inclusive workplace, a psychologically safe workplace for human beings is a workplace that A, respects every individual and sees the human in them, no more dehumanizing. B, gives everyone permission to do and say with respect what they need. And that means no more silencing, no more tokenism. You know, it's interesting. What I've seen is that when workplaces have more than one Black person in their company, they somehow cannot take it. Somehow they find a way to get rid of one of those two Black people. And it's a matter of who is going to stay remaining and who's going to become the full-on target of anti-Black racism moving forward. So inclusive workplace policy has to have three things: respect, permission, and what we call management soft skills. You know, where we are no longer in management 3.0, we no longer talk about hard skills where this person knows how to use the computer and this person is good in statistics, but it's whether this person has empathy, whether this person can be kind, whether this person can be generous, how this person talks to other people. That's more important because those are very hard. Humanity, it's very hard to teach someone Ubuntu, we say in my mother tongue. Ubuntu, seeing the person in community. And we know, even from the interview, within the first 5 minutes, a good HR person will tell you, I know whether this person will be a good addition to the team or not in 5 minutes. So instead of deciding before we meet a person whether they have the job or not, let us be fair and let's let each person present who they are. And let us see, get from my own connection as I listen to this person talking, whether I can feel that this person would be kind to me. Would this person be generous? And call you. It's funny, when I move from one side to the other, I'll be short, Carla, I'm sorry. I'll be short. When I moved from one side to the other, the office manager, when I arrived, she says to me, hey, I called your previous side, and here's what they said to me about you. They said, here's one thing you'll know for sure. Bo will greet you and everyone in the morning. She's not going to pass by the reception area and not make eye contact and say good morning, no matter what happens. And you can tell that from an interview, whether a person genuinely sees the human in everyone. The other thing I wanted to talk about, just briefly, Carla, is intergenerational trauma that each and every person carries. For Black people, it's the trauma of slavery. You know, it's interesting. When I moved back to Canada, I didn't think I would have any connection to the slavery trauma that occurred to my fellow Black people here. But I feel it. It is that lower back pain that you can't explain, that you can't go back 40 years and then explain, I fell. Maybe my mom dropped me by accident. I don't know. It's that waking up in the night. When I left my job, I was waking up in the night, bawling my eyes out because the workplace was so unsafe, so toxic to my brain because of the high adrenaline levels that occur when we live in microaggressions on a daily basis. So that's for Black people. There's a high incidence of anxiety in especially Black people because of racism and racist experience, the microaggressions every day, those needle pricks, they're going straight to your brain and they're making you live with high adrenaline. For white people, their white racial trauma is this: their legacy of knowing that their ancestors did something wrong, that the history denies them to know what exactly was done wrong to Black people. But why do I feel such hatred? And at the same time, why do I feel that I'm responsible for whatever has happened? And why do I feel like there is something I need to be doing, but I don't know what to do? My Caucasian husband, his word, not mine, he explained this to me in a way that I could understand his experience of what racial trauma is like. And the worst part with their white racial trauma is this: they can never talk about it. They can never work through it because the world does not believe it even exists and cannot acknowledge it. Right. The last point I wanted to make: resilience. Good people, we all have a brain. All of us, we have a brain. And just like we have a heart that pumps blood through our bodies, we have a brain that is a thinking machine, all the time scanning for safety, all the time scanning for connection, for love, for belonging. And if we do not take good care of our brain and see a brain doctor, which is your social worker and counselor, you're not doing justice to your brain. To be resilient, because it has to come from here, we should all be seeing at least a counselor once every 6 weeks, whether the EAP provides one or not. I have been seeing my counselor for a very long time, and I love her dearly.
Thank you so much, Bohang. Let's get back to the questions. We have, it looks like we've only got about 20 minutes, and unfortunately we have enough really solid questions here that we could have this conversation for another week. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. So I'm just going to prioritize the question here from Shara Marie-France, who has a question directly connected to mental health. And I'm going to ask each of our 4 career federal civil servants if they can either speak to Shara's question or talk about what sort of legacy that you would like to leave behind you in your organization and indeed for the entire public service. So one or the other, or both of you can fit it into a minute or two. But Shara's question is, how do you find relief for workplace anxiety, paranoia, and mental exhaustion caused by code switching? Always having to appear positive, approachable, and non-threatening. Okay, so we're all aware of that, having to walk into work with this facade of who we actually are so that we don't intimidate others, etc. So if you can speak to either the legacy that you'd like to leave or Shara Marie-France's question. Thank you. So Dinabu first, please.
I will go to the legacy piece. I would say that, I would like to make a difference really. And, I've had the privilege to work in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And today too, as of now, I have that portfolio as well. So I would like to leave a mark, and that for me, it shows up in a sense of duty, right? So yes, I will be empowering my organization and my two agencies and supporting them in that work. I like to feel like I have done everything in my power to contribute to the journey, because it is a journey. Like and offer my services, mentor people, mentor my Black colleagues, and mentor coach them and advocate in my organization as well. And hopefully see my two girls. I have two girls, 12 and 14. And just the other day, my daughter said to me, she's 10, and she says, I don't want to speak English anymore. And I said, why? She said that someone told her that she had an accent. I was mortified. I said to her, no. I said, I wasn't born here. I was born in Africa, West Africa. My husband as well. I said, Dad and Mom, we both have accents. It's okay. That's what I told her. I said, it's okay. You just have to push through. So I would like to, hopefully that my two daughters will thrive in an environment, a better environment that I live in. That's what I would like to see. And I will continue working, and I'm so happy to see this group and see the work that the federal government is doing in this regard. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you for this. Merci.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. How about you, Andrew?
Sure. Thanks again, Carla. And so I guess to that sort of first question that we received, which was about, the how it can be exhausting sometimes to sort of be adjusting and to maintain a sort of positive attitude, outlook all the time, despite the different sorts of pressures or microaggressions or different sort of situations that we face. And I think obviously not a simple answer there. I think I'd share one thing that is something that I really try to use, particularly in that sort of situation where you're meeting someone for the first time, including in job interviews. I know people are often interested with that as well. And it is trying to deal with that first impression, the expectations that people have of what you may be like based on simply what they see before them. And so for me, I do spend the first time period of any interview, doesn't matter how many questions are, how little time there is to respond, I talk about myself. I'm trying to humanize myself. And it's sort of a strategy that I developed, probably now it's 10 years ago, but it was based on what I was seeing was that I was being judged otherwise for just what they saw in front of them. A black male, aggressive, what other tendency, who knows what they were thinking. I don't know for sure, but they were often reacting to what they saw. And so I was doing what I could to try to reset and make sure that they would see me as a person. That simple. So it's something that I think is a valuable strategy. Little side note to that, I remember explaining that to different people before, including white colleagues. They couldn't understand why it would be important at all. So, I mean, just different perspectives. In terms of legacy, vraiment une excellente question. Et pour l'instant, je dirais que je suis heureux de montrer aux autres que les fonctionnaires noirs peuvent réussir. Et ceci, c'est non seulement important pour les fonctionnaires noirs, mais également pour les autres, pour que eux, ils voient et elles voient aussi que des employés noirs peuvent vraiment réussir dans leur carrière. I think really behind me, I would say in terms of legacy, would really want to have contributed to leaving a public service that is more inclusive. For me, in so many ways, it's not about diversity so much per se. It's really about putting the structures in place so that people do feel safe in the workplace and when they're working. So I think to me, that's really what inclusion really means. And I think the third thing will really be wanting to help develop other public servants so that we leave more people behind me that can continue to this work and to continuing to build inclusion so that all can succeed in the public service.
Thanks so much. Shay.
Hi, it's a good question. In terms of legacy, there's a number of things I'd love to see, what I would deem a success. To begin with, moving, I think Nadine, you spoke to this about the spectrum, and there is a spectrum of mindset. And while generally we are hearing from senior leaders that it's a time to move towards racial equality and equity, if we are to be honest, not everyone within our organization is there yet. From a mindset perspective, there are still people who are in denial that racial issues should be a priority in the organization right now. There are people who can be polarizing with this issue on both sides of the fence. And then we have people who with good intentions try to minimize and I don't see color. I just want us to all get along. And I think that's well-intentioned, but doesn't necessarily move us forward. And so it would be nice to see the organizations, all of our organizations, get to a place where we truly are at an acceptance stage, an acceptance that systemic racism does exist. A place that admits that we are working within a system that was centered around the white experience, and that has now become our reference point. And so it doesn't necessarily work for those for non-white people. And so understanding that and getting to that place of acceptance and to a place where we're ready and willing to dismantle and really address those issues. I think that would be the nirvana for me in terms of legacy. But more importantly, what I think I can do within my sphere of influence is really to help elevate those non-traditional voices within the organization. And like I said earlier, really try to ground our work forward with those voices, start to move the organization to a more co-creation space and approach to things. How can we better integrate those voices into how we inform our policy, inform our decision making? So that's something that I'm going to be working on. And like Andrew said, try to mentor and build the generations coming behind us. So really lift and lead as I move forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shay. Very eloquent. Nadine, please.
So the code switching question is a good one. And I think it's one that we all relate to in different ways as we have navigated our careers. And when I think about my early career, I think that preoccupation with fitting in and the the external gaze defining my work identity was much stronger than it is now in my career. And I think that folks who are starting out in their career really are sort of seized with wanting that upward mobility, and so there's a lot of pressure, and the pressure comes from a number of places. For myself anyway, as my career has evolved and I've been much more deliberate about choosing the work that I love as opposed to the work that chose me, I've been, my authentic self has sort of come together with my work self, much more so. There's always a professional persona, folks. It's never going to go away, but that persona isn't defined as much by my Blackness anymore as it once was. And it's because I have chosen work that I love, and I've chosen people that I love to work with. And I'm in a very privileged space right now because not only do I report to a Black woman, I have, I'm deliberately engaging broader diversity and increasing Blackness in the organization that I am working in now. And I think when I think about code switching, one of the or the anxiety associated and how to deal with that, it actually ties right into my legacy ambition. And that is to ensure that I diversify the public service as much as I possibly can before it is my last day. And Blackness matters. Blackness is, and moving away from the negative Black narratives and embracing the Black excellence narrative is a core part of that work. But it's not the only part of the work for me, because I believe quite sincerely, and I live the diversity and inclusion that I believe in, that it takes us all to make a healthy, representative public service. And there is no question that Blackness has been subsumed in the public service, but Blackness has been subsumed in the society as a whole. And we need to work on our society as we work on our public service. I think what I'd like to know that I've done when I leave the public service is that I've done my part deliberately as an accomplice, that I've made decisions within my sphere of influence, which has grown over the years in my career, that I've made decisions that challenge the narrative around Blackness, that challenge the narrative around racialization, that demonstrates that difference is valuable. It is key to progress, to innovation, that LGBTQ2 plus individuals, Indigenous peoples, Black people, people of color, white people, all have a very instrumental role to play in ensuring that the public service remains professional. It remains in service to the people that live in Canada, and it remains one of the most recognized public services in the world. And for me, that is integrally important as I walk out the door. I think that we all have a sphere of influence, and we all have choices to make in terms of what decisions we take within that sphere of influence. And the lens that you bring, the mindset that you bring to those decisions is important. And so if you bring an inclusion mindset, you bring an anti-Black racism mindset, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, you can do that. And it's about each of us being individually accountable and responsible for ensuring that we bring our best selves into the workplace every day, and that we do the best that we can to live the ideas that Canada is founded on. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is founded on an equity, equality foundation. And if we are Canadian, if we are in the Canadian public service, then we need to live to those ideals every single day. For those of you who are interested in really establishing a bit of a foundation around equity, diversity, and inclusion, I encourage you to read 2 reports that were completed by the public service in 2017, 2018. One of them is Many Voices, One Mind. It's a pathway to recruitment and retention for Indigenous peoples. It identifies the myriad of barriers that Indigenous peoples face in the public service. And the other one is the Joint Task Force Report on Diversity and Inclusion. It lays out recommendations that were jointly agreed to by the Public Service Union, and the employers. I was part of both of those reports, and they really are the foundation for the work that's being done in the public service now. And so when I think about legacy in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, I feel quite satisfied that there is a blueprint that's been established based on community voices, based on employee voices, based on external voices, based on Indigenous voices, that has set the foundation for the direction the public service is going to take. So I, after 20 odd years, ups and downs, my most despised microaggression is I don't see color. You don't see me then. Thank you for that. It's not always easy to be me in the public service, but I would never trade it. I would never trade the experience of being in service to people living in Canada. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nadine. I think it's time to hear from our two co-chairs, actually, for FBEC, starting with Charlene Liebert-Scott, if you'd like to start to close up this little experience we've had together today.
Oh, thank you, everybody. It has been such an amazing discussion. I've reviewed some of the chats. I've heard the conversations. I'm amazed and of the learning and of the authentic sharing of information that, from what I have seen, has been very useful and well appreciated and accepted. Yes, my name is Charlene Liebert-Scott. I am one of the co-chairs for the BC Federal Black Employees Caucus. I am also its founder. I currently work at the Canada Energy Regulators as one of their labor relations technical advisors. And I am grateful for my department for allowing me to do this. And as well as I also share the co-chair role with my partner, Liz Martin, my partner in crime. What I wanted to say in terms of closing remarks was to thank Minister Hussein for his opening remarks and sort of setting the tone. It's not just about Black history, because Black history for us is 365 days of the year. But, you know, it was also setting the tone that there are some issues that need to be addressed, sorry, and that we collectively, it starts by having a discussion. It starts by acknowledging the elephant, as some would put it, that's in the room. And that is that, you know, we may be living in Canada and we may be living in, working in the federal public service, but racism exists and it's here, okay? And we need to address it. I love what I heard from the panel members about, you know, if you're invited to the table, own your space, okay? And that's really important, because over the years, if I was to look back at my younger self, I would say that was one of the things you get at the table, but sometimes you are silent because you're an observer, but also sometimes you're silent because you're not quite sure that you deserve to have your voice heard. And I would say for today's public servants and those who are currently here, voice. If there's something that you have value to contribute, make that contribution, because at the end of the day, you belong there. You didn't find yourself at that table just by happenstance, you belong there. And other things that I heard were just amazing as well. There was just so much, but our organizations need to create a truly respectful organization, not just in words and in policy, but in deeds as well, and words. We also have, our organizations need to give respect so that people are seen, Black people are seen, Black people are heard, and Black people are valued, and Black people are given their opportunity. It's one thing not to be given an opportunity, to be given an opportunity and turn it down. But if you're not even given the chance for an opportunity, that is where we have a challenge. And then the concept of, I may have heard it wrongly, but management of humanity, you know, yes, bring some generosity to the workplace, bring some empathy to the workplace, understand that your experience as a white person or a person of color is not going to be the same as a person who is Black. And even we within the Black community understand and recognize that my brothers and sisters who are Caribbean have a very different experience from my brothers and sisters who are born in Africa versus the ones who are born in Europe and the ones that are born here in North America. We all have a lived experience, but it's not the same. And that is where the whole concept of sameness, you know, I don't see color is really a slight and a hit to what it is to be considered human, as well as to be kind. You know, be in the workplace and be kind to people. Somebody said it earlier, you can't teach this stuff. Either you have it or you don't. And you walk into the workplace, and as an HR person, it's I have to admit, it's not always easy to see this in people. Some people are very good at hiding it, or you know, not truly showing who they are, just because they want power. But at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't make you weak to be empathetic. It doesn't make you weak to be kind, and it doesn't make you weak to be generous. As a matter of fact, it makes a much stronger person. It makes a much stronger organization. And that is what I want to say that we have today, is that we had a strong conversation about what it is to consider everybody in the public service, which means including our Black employees and our Black colleagues, because at the end of the day, if we collectively cannot be seen and heard and believed and valued as strong people, there is no way that we can provide effective client service and move our organizations forward. So on that note, I'd just like to say thank you so much to all of you for participating and providing your comments and your perspectives and giving people out there some hope. Thank you very much.
Liz, if you can bring it home for us.
Merci beaucoup. I want to thank all those incredible panelists, Nadine Huggins, Gina Busso, Shay Malcolm, Andrew Brown, Aisha Sake, and Benedicts and Bohang Benedicts for saying yes to this invitation. And thank you also to those Black executives who illustrate the Black excellence to accept an invitation from FBEC BC chapter, because we thought that it was important also to engage the province, because what's happening on the west coast of Canada may be different from what's happening on the east coast of Canada. So thank you very much for engaging with us. I would like to thank Finn, particularly Marcella. I would like to thank our talented moderator, Carla Baker. I would like to thank the FBEC and FBEC BC chapter, as well as Erin, because without them, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I would like also to thank our co-champions, Ravinder Rakra and Roxanne Lee, for supporting us. And last but not least, I would like to thank my family, my parents, my siblings, and my two beautiful nephews. And thank you to the audience for showing up and supporting us. It is just the beginning. Change is coming. Thank you.
I think between you, Charlene, and you, Liz, you've said it all. So what I'd like to do is to remind you all, please, to make sure to continue this conversation. This is Black History Month, but why is it just a month? Let's continue the conversation. And if you need additional help, please reach out to EAP or your mental health services available through your province or city, okay? Take care of yourselves so that we can take care of Canada. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on our journey today. Bye-bye.